When examining missing persons cases in greater depth, it becomes clear that each disappearance is not a single event but a layered sequence of decisions, environmental factors, investigative responses, and evolving narratives. The cases of Madeleine McCann, Maura Murray, and Brian Schaffer illustrate how uncertainty is constructed over time, not simply discovered. What makes these cases endure is not only the lack of resolution, but the way each one exposes structural weaknesses in how humans interpret incomplete information. In the case of Madeleine McCann, a deeper analysis requires looking beyond the headline narrative of a child vanishing from a holiday apartment and into the mechanics of the investigation itself. The initial response by local authorities in Portugal has been widely scrutinized, particularly regarding crime scene preservation. Reports suggest that the apartment was not immediately sealed in a manner consistent with best forensic practices, allowing multiple individuals to enter and potentially contaminate evidence. This matters because in cases involving potential abduction, trace evidence, fibers, DNA, footprints, can be decisive, especially within the first critical hours. Additionally, the delay in issuing border alerts may have reduced the likelihood of intercepting a potential abductor leaving the region. However, focusing solely on procedural shortcomings risks oversimplifying the case. There is also the question of probabilistic reasoning. Statistically, most missing children cases involve individuals known to the victim rather than strangers. Over time, the investigation expanded across multiple jurisdictions, introducing issues of coordination, legal differences, and communication barriers. The involvement of various agencies from the United Kingdom and Portugal illustrates how international cases can become fragmented, with parallel lines of inquiry that do not always align. The persistence of the case in public consciousness is also tied to media amplification. Continuous coverage has generated an almost self-sustaining cycle of new leads, many of which lack credibility but must still be assessed. This creates a paradox where visibility both aids and obstructs progress, as investigators are pulled between following evidence and responding to public pressure. Turning to Maura Murray, a deeper examination reveals a case defined by ambiguity at nearly every stage. Unlike the McCann case, where the central question revolves around what happened within a confined space, Murray's disappearance is geographically expansive and psychologically complex. Her actions in the days leading up to the incident suggest a deliberate departure from her routine. She withdrew money, packed personal items, and searched for directions to remote areas. These behaviors imply intent, yet intent alone does not clarify outcome. One possibility is that she sought temporary isolation and encountered an unforeseen event, such as injury or exposure to harsh weather conditions. The environment in rural New Hampshire is a critical factor. Dense forests, uneven terrain, and low temperatures can quickly become life-threatening, especially for someone unprepared for extended outdoor exposure. Search efforts in the area have been extensive, involving ground teams, dogs, and aerial surveys, yet they have not produced definitive results. This raises important questions about search theory and limitations. Even well-coordinated searches can fail due to terrain complexity, decomposition processes, and the possibility that remains are concealed by natural elements. There is also the competing theory of third-party involvement. The short window between the car crash and the arrival of law enforcement suggests that if someone encountered Murray, it would have required a rapid and opportunistic interaction. While possible, this scenario depends on a convergence of timing and intent that is difficult to verify. Psychologically, the case invites analysis of stress factors in Murray's life, including academic pressure and personal relationships. Yet interpreting these factors risks projecting narratives that may not align with reality. The absence of conclusive evidence means that each theory remains speculative, and over time, The case becomes less about determining a single truth and more about evaluating competing probabilities. The disappearance of Brian Schaffer presents a different kind of analytical challenge, one rooted in spatial constraints and technological assumptions. The central mystery, that he was seen entering a bar but not leaving, creates an apparent contradiction that has fueled extensive speculation. A deeper analysis requires questioning the reliability and completeness of the surveillance system. Cameras do not capture reality in its entirety. They record specific angles at specific times, leaving gaps that may be insignificant in ordinary circumstances, but critical in investigations. It is possible that Schaffer exited through a service door or another area not covered by cameras, which would resolve the apparent paradox without invoking more complex explanations. Yet even if such an exit occurred, the question of what happened afterward remains unanswered. Urban disappearances differ from rural ones in that they involve a higher density of potential witnesses and interactions, yet this density can also obscure events. In a crowded nightlife environment, individuals move in and out of spaces rapidly, and unusual behavior may go unnoticed. Schaffer's personal context adds another layer. He was dealing with the recent loss of his mother and the pressures of medical school. These factors have led some to consider the possibility of voluntary disappearance. However, sustaining such a disappearance over a long period without leaving a trace, financial, digital, or social, is exceedingly difficult. This brings the analysis back to the limitations of evidence. Even in a case with surveillance footage, the absence of a clear exit path creates a narrative vacuum that is filled by increasingly speculative theories. Across all three cases, a deeper pattern emerges involving the concept of informational decay. In the immediate aftermath of a disappearance, there is typically a surge of data, witness statements, physical evidence, and environmental observations. Over time, this information degrades. Memories become less reliable, physical evidence deteriorates, and investigative priorities shift. What remains is a fragmented record that must be interpreted long after the context in which it was created has faded. This process contributes to the persistence of mystery, as gaps in the record allow multiple interpretations to coexist. Another important dimension is the role of cognitive bias, both in investigations and in public discourse. Confirmation bias can lead investigators or observers to favor evidence that supports a particular theory while discounting contradictory information. In high-profile cases like McCann's, public opinion can become polarized, with different groups advocating for competing explanations. In Murray's case, the ambiguity of her actions invites narrative construction, where observers impose coherent stories onto incomplete data. In Schaffer's case, the apparent impossibility of the situation encourages more elaborate theories, even when simpler explanations may exist but lack direct evidence. Ultimately, these cases demonstrate that missing persons investigations are as much about managing uncertainty as they are about uncovering facts. Each case resists closure not because it lacks significance, but because it highlights the limits of human knowledge in complex, real-world situations. The deeper one examines them, the more apparent it becomes that the mystery is sustained not only by what is unknown, but by how the known information is interpreted, reinterpreted, and sometimes distorted over time.